Today's topic, Bloodless Wars. If you came for the bloodiest wars, head on out. And starting it up right now, the Pig War. It was the year 1859, and tensions between the United States and the United Kingdom had reached a boiling point over the San Juan Islands lying between Vancouver Island and the Washington Territory. The reason? A pig. And yes, you heard that right. It's in the name, the Pig War. Oink oink. On June 15, 1859, an American settler named Lyman Cutler discovered a big black pig eating his potato crop. Furious, he shot and killed the pig. The pig, however, was the property of Charles Griffin, who was an employee of the Hudson Bay Company. Lyman offered to pay $10 to Charles, but Charles wanted $100 for his now dead pig. Lyman refused, and the situation started to spiral out of control. And I can understand him. If you think about $10 and $100 back then, that's a lot of money, and I didn't even calculate it because the heart of the problem lay in the Oregon Treaty of 1846. The treaty outlined that the border should run through the middle of the channel, separating Vancouver Island from the mainland. But the agreement lacked clarity which channel was intended. The British supported the Rosario Strait, while the Americans supported the Haro Strait. Between the roots sat the San Juan Islands. Oh my goodness. After all that happened, the British officials tried to arrest Lyman. Brigadier General William S. Harney caught wind of all of this since the American settlers asked for military protection. He was known for his anti-British stance and ordered Captain George Pickett to lead troops to occupy the island. Pickett confidently declared, "We'll make a Bunker Hill of it," which, from what it seems, he's trying to live in the glory days. His glory days were past. Wait till the Civil War comes and Mr. Pickett here is going to make sure he doesn't picket again. Governor James Douglas was enraged and sent Royal Navy ships commanded by Captain Joffrey Phipps Hornby to deal with the U.S. troops. However, Hornby wisely refrained from taking the first hostile action, understanding the dire consequences of open conflict, which is probably the smarter guy at the moment. Now here comes General Winfield Scott, who was a skilled man in situations like this, especially having successfully negotiated peace during the Aroostook War, a previous border dispute between the UK and the United States. Scott saw how dumb it was to wage war over a pig. He traveled to the San Juan Islands and mediated directly with the British authorities, which, even I saw it from a mile away. If we were going to go to war for a pig, it better be an expensive pig. I mean, the pig was expensive, but when I mean expensive, made out of gold or something, have gold skin, a living golden skin pig. With the help of Winfield's diplomacy, both nations agreed to pull back and establish joint military control over the island, avoiding bloodshed and maintaining peace. Years later, after a civil war went by and a few other things happened, that finally, in 1872, the issue was finally resolved through arbitration by Kaiser Wilhelm I of Germany. His decision awarded the San Juan Islands to the United States. The British withdrew, marking the official end of the Pig War, which, I know the British were probably a little upset about that whole thing. They're probably like, come on, man, why did that have to happen? Why couldn't we just get the islands, huh? Why do the Americans have to get the islands? How I see it is like the Americans were like, hey, Germany, I need your help with this. We need your help with this. We both want these set of islands, but we can't come to an agreeable agreement. Can you decide for us? And over there, Wilhelm was probably like, ja, and just pointed at the Americans. On to the next war, the Lobster War. Funny name. First you got the Pig War, now you got the Lobster War. The early 1960s were a rough time for France. Having given up most of its African colonies, the nation was eager to secure new resources. French fishermen, especially those from the port town of Camaret, turned their attention to the abundant lobster fields off Brazil's coast. However, this newfound ambition quickly turned into a problem. Now President João Goulart of Brazil was steadfast in defending his country's marine wealth. In response to the French fishing vessels, Brazil expelled the French from the area and started seizing vessels, but would eventually let them go. Brazil maintained that the lobsters crawled along the seabed, thereby making them part of Brazil. France countered, claiming lobsters swam, which put them beyond any nation's exclusive jurisdiction. Paulo de Castro of the Brazilian Navy would call the French argument weak, and would further say, by analogy, if a lobster is a fish because it moves by jumping, then a kangaroo is a bird. Which, that's fair reasoning. As hostilities mounted, Brazilian naval forces intercepted French fishing boats demanding their immediate withdrawal. Meanwhile, President Charles de Gaulle of France refused to concede. He dispatched warships, notably the destroyer Taru, to protect its fishing fleet. Brazil mobilized several warships and their air force. During all of this, the United States reminded Brazil that the license for American equipment such as the B-17 did not permit them to be used against opponents. So the United States was like, hey, I can't allow you to use my stuff to attack one of my other allies, France over here, because that will look bad. Which, understanding them, shoot, I wouldn't want no one using something that I gave them to also do something bad. But, I am also on the fence being like, well, it's mine, I'm going to use it how I want to use it. You have to come take it from me, which knowing the United States, they would probably find a way. Despite the buildup of military forces, both nations were wary of sparking an actual conflict. Behind closed doors, diplomats engaged in lengthy negotiations to diffuse the tension. Finally, on December 10, 1964, an agreement was reached. French fishing vessels could continue their activities in the region for a 5-year period, provided that they share part of the lobster's harvest with Brazilian fishermen. I understand that. I get a cut of what you get. You get the fish in my area. There we go. Little, little my casa's su casa. Or, now it's be like su casa's mi casa. And with that, the lobster war ended peacefully. Thank goodness it did, because a war over lobsters. First a war for pig, then a war over lobsters. Now, this war that we're going to talk about is a bit of a funny war to me, because nothing actually happened. Meet the Anglo-Swedish War of 1810 and 1812, a conflict that existed only on paper and nothing else. During the Napoleonic era in 1810, Napoleon was enforcing the Continental System, a trade embargo designed to crush the UK's huge economy. Having endured significant losses during the Finnish War and the Pomeranian War, Sweden signed the Treaty of Paris on January 6, 1810, agreeing to join Napoleon's blockade against the UK. Oh, I need to take a little sip. Oh, my mouth is getting dry. But the problem was the UK was Sweden's biggest trading partner. Cutting off trade threatened Sweden's already fragile economy. Despite officially joining Napoleon's trade embargo, Sweden discreetly continued trading with the UK through smuggling operations, which, I would too. Frustrated, Napoleon issued an ultimatum on November 13, 1810. Sweden was given 5 days to declare war on the UK, seize British ships docked in Swedish ports, and confiscate British goods. Failure to comply would mean war against France and its allies. Faced with mounting threats, Sweden reluctantly declared war on the UK on November 17, 1810. But here's the kicker. They had no genuine intent to engage in actual combat. Who knew, Who knew, my friends? Who knew? While officially at war, the UK openly stationed ships at Hanno, a Swedish island used as a trade hub. Sweden made no attempts to interfere. In fact, they welcomed the arrangement and even counted it as the British occupying the island. It's a little, way around Napoleon's continental system, Oh, they took the island. Hey, UK, bring me some good stuff to this island. I'll say you occupied it. We call it even. We trade back and forth. Mano y mano. We good. Napoleon will never know. By 1812, Sweden's relationship with France had deteriorated. Crown Prince Jean-Baptiste Bernadotte viewed Napoleon's expansionist ambitions as a threat to Sweden's sovereignty. Following France's occupation of Swedish Pomerania and Rügen, Sweden initiated peace talks with the UK. On July 18, 1812, the Treaty of Örebro was signed, officially bringing the Anglo-Swedish War to an end. On the same day, the UK also finalized peace with Russia, ending the Anglo-Russian War as well. You gotta get 2 birds with 1 stone. And so the Anglo-Swedish War concluded, and that was it. That was it. Sweden and the UK, they were chill like that. Ended like that. Go on your ways. Now, we've talked about the Pig War, we've talked about the Lobster War, and we've also talked about the Swedish Anglo War, the Anglo-Swedish War. This next war is very similar to the Anglo-Swedish War, except some friendly liquor swapping. Enter the Whiskey War, a decade-long territorial dispute between Canada and Denmark over Hans Island. Hans Island is a small, desolate piece of land nestled in the Nares Strait, separating Greenland and Canada's Ellesmere Island, measuring just 1.3 square kilometers. And trust me, it sounds a lot better in kilometers. It all started back in 1973 when Canada and Denmark worked to define their maritime borders. While the two nations resolved most of the boundary lines, Hans Island became a point of contention. Both sides claimed that the island as their own, but in the end said it was not that important as at the moment and it would be settled at a later date, which is probably something I would do, which has actually happened a lot. Not with islands, but you procrastinate. And these are two countries procrastinating. Like, yeah, you know what? We'll deal with this later on. It's not that important. 4 years, the island remained in this unresolved status until 1984 when the dispute took a funny turn. Canadian troops would visit the island and plant the Canadian flag and leave a bottle of Canadian whiskey. Later, the Danish Minister of Greenland Affairs also visited the island, leaving the Danish flag and a bottle of schnapps, with a letter saying, "Welcome to the Danish island." Welcome to the Danish island. It's not Canadian, it's the Danish island. Canada came back, did the opposite, and this started the Whiskey War. For decades, the lighthearted exchange continued. Danish and Canadian officials took turns visiting Hans Island, swapping flags and leaving bottles of their nation's favorite liquors. Despite the ongoing disagreement, the two countries treated this as more of a friendly competition than a genuine conflict, which is probably good. Imagine fighting over a little speck of land, which, knowing history, it has happened a lot. By the early 21st century, both Canada and Denmark saw the importance of formally resolving the dispute. Years of behind-the-scenes diplomatic discussion led to the breakthrough in the year 2022. The two nations reached an agreement to divide Hans Island in half, establishing the first ever land border between Canada and Denmark, and thus ending the Whiskey War, which is another very bloodless war. Very fun war, if I would mean. I mean, shoot, how much money did they actually spend? Yeah, imagine how much money was spent. I'm not going to do the math right now. I'm a little tired. But bloodless wars. With the word war, they kind of sound bad, but not much goes on besides a few arguments. An issue with a pig here, issue with lobsters. You got Napoleon breathing down Sweden's neck, and Canada and Denmark swapping liquors. Good old time to be human and know that some of these wars could have happened because of funny reasons. That's how we're going to leave it as. Funny reasons. Thank you all for watching. And yeah, have a good one. Adios. Peace. Ciao. Have a good one.